Stefan lived with his wife Sabine and their 2 children on the ground floor of a post-war housing block, at the edge of a town that had lost its factory 3 years prior. The apartment smelled of damp concrete and boiled potatoes. Paint flaked from the ceiling, in patterns that resembled maps of countries that no longer existed. Stefan had not worked in 20 months. He rose at 7 each morning, made instant coffee, and sat by the window, where he could watch the delivery trucks pass, on their way to the industrial park. He never shouted. He simply became part of the furniture, another object that required dusting. The children, Franz 10 and Maya 7, had learned to move around him as one moves around a chair. That is always in the wrong place. Sabine had started working as a cashier at the discount supermarket 6 months ago. She brought home expired bread and dented tins. In the evenings, she typed on her phone. The screen lit her face with a blue glow that made her look like a stranger. She had stopped asking Franz about his schoolwork. She no longer checked if Maya had brushed her teeth. The children noticed these absences the way one notices a clock that has stopped ticking. Not immediately, but gradually, as a growing uncertainty about the time. On Tuesday, she came home with a new phone, a smartphone, though they had no internet connection at home. Franz saw her crouched behind the utility building during her break, smoking a cigarette she had rolled herself. She looked at the phone, as if it might contain proof of something. That night, Stefan fell asleep on the sofa, with the television showing static. The children slept in the smaller room, their breath falling into the same rhythm. At 3:14, Sabine rose from the mattress that she and Stefan no longer shared. She took the plastic bag she had hidden under the sink, one with the supermarket's logo, and placed inside it a change of clothes, her toothbrush, the bottle of perfume Stefan had given her for her 25th birthday, and the remaining 40 euros from her last paycheck. The door latch clicked. She did not pause. The hallway light, which had been broken for weeks, remained dark. Outside, a car idled with its headlights off. It was a Renault with rust around the wheel arches. The engine made a grinding sound that suggested it would not last the winter. Sabine opened the passenger door and placed her bag at her feet. She looked straight ahead. The car moved forward, not quickly, as if obeying the speed limit of a town that was not yet awake. In the morning, Franz woke first. He went to the kitchen. The tap dripped into an unwashed pot. The bread bin was empty. The calendar on the wall showed Wednesday, but Sabine had not crossed off Tuesday. He stood in the doorway of the main room. Stefan was still on the sofa, one arm hanging to the floor, his fingers nearly touching an overturned mug. "Papa," Franz said. "She's not here." Stefan opened his eyes. He did not ask who. He looked at the door, then at the window, as if the answer might be written in the condensation on the glass. Maya came out in her socks, dragging the blanket she refused to sleep without. "Where's Mama?" she asked. Franz looked at his father. Stefan sat up. He ran his hand over his face and felt the stubble that had come in white around his chin. "She'll be back," he said, but he was looking at the empty hook by the door, where Sabine's coat should have been. Maya climbed onto Franz's lap. They sat at the kitchen table, which wobbled on 3 legs. The 4th leg had been propped up with a folded piece of cardboard since last spring. Franz straightened it. Maya traced a pattern in the crumbs. Neither of them spoke. The refrigerator hummed, then clicked off, leaving a silence that felt like a debt that needed to be paid. The afternoon settled into the apartment like dust. Franz stood at the window overlooking the courtyard, where a single birch tree had died and never been removed. He counted 11 trucks before he stopped. Maya sat on the floor, arranging 3 plastic forks in a row, then upside down, then in a row again. The light changed, but nothing else did. Stefan remained on the sofa. At some point, he had placed a jacket over his shoulders, as if he were cold in the stillness. His hands rested on his knees. The right one trembled slightly, a movement that seemed to belong to someone else. When the sun reached the top of the housing block opposite, Franz went to the kitchen. He opened the cabinet beneath the sink, where Sabine had kept the potatoes. There were 2 small ones sprouting eyes. He closed the cabinet. He opened it again. The potatoes were still there. He took them out and washed them in water that never got hot. The tap dripped onto his sleeve. "You should eat," he said to Maya. Not a question. Fact like the weather. She looked at the potatoes. "Will she be back before dark?" Stefan rose from the sofa. He went to the bedroom and came back with the leather wallet corners frayed. He opened it. Franz could see the empty plastic sleeves where cards had been. Stefan removed 3 coins. They made no sound when he placed them on the table. The table wobbled. The cardboard prop had shifted. "I'll go to the shop," Stefan said. His voice had the quality of something reused too many times. "Not that one," Franz said. "They won't give more credit." Stefan looked at his son, as if noticing a change in the wallpaper. Then he sat back down. The jacket slipped from his shoulders. Franz left the apartment at 4:30. He walked through walkways where the council had installed security lights. That never worked. In the parking area, 2 boys were breaking glass bottles against the concrete base of a light pole. They didn't look at him. He passed the supermarket where Sabine had worked. The manager was locking up, pulling metal grills across the doors. Franz kept walking. He found what he was looking for. On a side street, where the shop fronts had metal shutters that stayed down, a man was loading boxes from a van onto a dolly. Franz stood at a distance, where he wouldn't have to speak loudly. "Do you need help?" he asked. The man didn't stop. "No. I can carry them. There are no deliveries." Franz watched the man stack 3 boxes, then a 4th. The top box had a label, showing a picture of detergent. The man secured them with a strap that was missing its buckle. "Tomorrow maybe," the man said. "I'll come back." "You do that." Franz returned at 7 the next morning. The van was gone, but the metal shutter was raised halfway. He crouched under it. Inside, the man was sorting bottles onto shelves. He looked at Franz without expression. "Those crates go in the back," he said, pointing. "Don't break anything." The crates contained empty bottles for return. Franz lifted one. It was heavier than he expected. The plastic handles cut into his fingers. He carried it through a doorway into a room that smelled of yeast and sour milk. He made 3 trips. On the 4th, the man's wife appeared with a tray of coffee cups. She didn't offer him any. "That's enough," the man said. He pulled out his wallet and gave Franz a €5 note folded twice. "Don't come tomorrow. There's no more work." Franz walked home with the note in his fist. The bakery would open at 8. He waited outside until the baker's assistant arrived, then bought 2 rolls that were yesterday's and therefore half price. The assistant put them in a paper bag without looking at him. Maya was awake when he returned. She was sitting on the edge of the bed they shared, her feet not reaching the floor. Stefan stood in the kitchen holding a pot under the tap. The pot was already full. Water ran over the rim and onto his shoes. He didn't seem to notice. "We have bread," Franz said. He placed the bag on the table. The table remained still for once. They ate separately. Stefan chewed without tasting. Maya tore her roll into pieces, arranging them in a circle. Franz watched the window. A woman from the floor above walked past with a pushchair. The baby in it was crying. The woman didn't look up. That afternoon Maya lay down. She said her chest felt heavy. Franz placed his hand on her forehead. It was warm, but everything in the apartment was warm in the afternoons, when the sun hit the concrete walls. He gave her water from the glass they had bought at the flea market, the one with the chip in the rim. She drank and coughed. The cough was small and dry like paper rustling. "Sleep," Franz said. He pulled the blanket over her shoulders. The blanket had a pattern of faded roses that Sabine had chosen. Stefan spent the evening sitting on the steps outside the building. The other residents passed him without speaking. Mrs. Keller from the 3rd floor carried 2 bags of groceries. She slowed, then continued. The automatic light above the entrance flickered and went out. Stefan remained in the dark until the smell of cooking from the Turkish restaurant 3 blocks away, reminded him that he should go inside. In the bedroom, Franz and Maya lay side by side. He could feel the heat from her body. It seemed concentrated, as if she were burning from a single point inside. He thought about the €5 note. The man had said not to come back. The supermarket had already replaced Sabine. He had seen the new cashier through the window, a woman with red hair who moved slowly, as if she had all the time in the world. Maya turned toward him. Will she bring medicine when she comes back? Franz looked at the ceiling. There was a crack there that he had never noticed. It ran from the light fixture to the corner. Sleep, he said. The next morning, Maya did not get up. She coughed, and something in the sound was wet this time. Stefan stood in the doorway. He had not shaved. His jaw looked soft, undefined. She needs a doctor, Franz said. Stefan nodded. The nod continued for too long, as if he had forgotten how to stop. I'll go to the health center, Franz said. They won't see her without an appointment. I'll wait. He waited 4 hours on a plastic chair in a corridor. That smelled of disinfectant. The receptionist told him to come back with her insurance card. He said they had lost it. She told him to call the number. He said they had no credit on their phone. She gave him a form. He filled it out, with a pen that didn't work properly, his hand cramping around it. When he returned, Maya was sleeping. Stefan had moved her to the main room, onto the sofa where he usually sat. Her breathing was audible, a slight catch on each inhale. Franz placed the form on the table. The table wobbled. He adjusted the cardboard. It didn't help. That evening, he went back to the shop. The shutter was down. He knocked. No one answered. He knocked again. A neighbor opened a window above and told him to stop making noise. Franz stood in the street until it became dark enough that he could no longer see the shutter's graffiti. Inside, Maya's fever had risen. He could feel it without touching her. Stefan sat in the chair across the room. His body collapsed into itself like an empty coat. Franz thought about calling someone, but the only number he knew by heart was Sabine's, and she had taken the SIM card from the old phone before leaving. The new smartphone had never been activated. It sat in a drawer, a useless rectangle of glass and plastic. He made a decision then, though it felt less like a choice than like tipping forward when the ground beneath you has already fallen away. In the morning, he would go to the school. The social worker there had once given a presentation about resources. He remembered a pamphlet. He remembered the word emergency. He remembered that he was 12 years old, and that this was supposed to mean something. Maya coughed again. The sound was smaller now, as if it came from deeper inside her, from a place that was already far away. Stefan did not move. Franz sat on the floor beside the sofa and watched his sister's chest rise and fall, each time a little less certainly than the time before. The health center had given him an appointment for Friday. It was Tuesday. Franz placed the appointment card on the table, waited with the empty coffee mug. The mug's handle had cracked, in a way that made it uncomfortable to hold. Maya's cough had developed a rhythm, like a machine that couldn't be turned off. She slept on the sofa now, because climbing to the bedroom required effort she no longer had. Stefan sat beside her feet, his own breathing audible. In the quiet apartment, it had a wheeze at the end, a note that hadn't been there before. On Wednesday morning, Franz returned to the shop. The shutter was still down, but a delivery van was idling in the alley. He helped the driver unload crates of bottled water. The driver gave him a €10 note and a bottle with a torn label. Franz drank half and brought the rest home. Stefan was standing in the kitchen when he arrived. He had opened all the cabinets and left them open, as if searching for something he had misplaced. His hands trembled as he closed each door one by one. "She's asking for water," Stefan said. His voice had become a sound that required effort to produce. Franz went to Maya. Her forehead was damp. He wiped it with the sleeve of his sweater. She looked at him without recognition for a moment, then closed her eyes again. That evening, Stefan sat on the edge of the sofa, where Maya lay. He had not changed his clothes in 3 days. The fabric of his shirt had stretched at the collar. He placed his hand on Maya's ankle, a gesture that seemed to require him to remember how to do it. "Your mother called once," Stefan said. He was looking at the wall, not at Franz. "From a number I didn't know. She said she was in the city. She said she was looking for work." Franz waited. The radiator made a clicking sound, expanding in its metal housing. "I told her you were both fine," Stefan said. "I didn't ask when she was coming back." He stood up. The movement took time, as if his body were resisting the instruction. He went to the bedroom and closed the door. The sound of the latch was soft, final. Thursday morning, Franz woke to find Maya's breathing had changed. It was shallower, more deliberate, as if each inhalation needed to be considered. He placed his hand on her chest and felt the rise and fall, the thin ribs beneath his palm. The skin there was hot and dry. He knocked on the bedroom door. No answer. He opened it. Stefan lay on the mattress, still in his clothes. His eyes were open, fixed on the ceiling crack that Franz had noticed days before. Franz stood in the doorway for 3 minutes, watching his father's chest. It did not move. Franz stepped closer. The room smelled of dust and old coffee, a weight that seemed to press against his chest. "Papa," he called, louder this time. His voice trembled. He shook the shoulder that had felt so solid for years. Once, then again. Nothing. The body remained still, indifferent to his words, as if it had never been part of this world. Franz pressed his fingers against his father's neck the way he had seen on television. He felt the emptiness, the absence. He waited. Still nothing. A small sound rose from him, choked, uneven, more surprise than grief. He did not know it could come from him. He sat on the edge of the mattress, bent forward, burying his face in his hands. His chest heaved in bursts. Each breath carried a fraction of disbelief. Time passed. Or maybe it didn't. He stopped counting. He only felt the weight of the room and the floor beneath him. A knock came. Mrs. Keller, the neighbor from the 3rd floor, appeared in the doorway. Her eyes took in the room, the bed, Franz's face. She said nothing else. Only, "I'll call." Before noon the men arrived. Gray jackets, quiet movements, efficient hands. They did not ask questions. They wrapped the body in a sheet, then in a mattress cover. The scrape of fabric against the walls left marks Franz could almost read. He watched from the kitchen doorway. No one told him to leave. He saw them carry the weight down the stairs. The sounds of footsteps and fabric brushing against walls filled the silence in the apartment. Each echo reminded him of a life that had just ended. Later, a woman from the city office spoke slowly, explaining the procedure. There would be paperwork. The burial would be handled by the municipality. There was a section for people without arrangements. A date would come by post. Franz listened. He nodded where nodding was expected, absorbing the facts the same way he had absorbed everything else in this apartment, quietly, with a thin layer of detachment. In the room, the dust motes floated in the sunlight, indifferent to grief. Franz sat alone, noticing the marks on the wall, the uneven paint, the small scuff from the mattress. Everything stayed the same. Everything had changed. He closed the door again. He went to the kitchen and filled the kettle. He measured the last of the coffee into the chipped mug. He sat at the table, which wobbled, and waited for the water to boil. The appointment card was still there, still weighted by the mug. Friday, 11 o'clock. He turned the card over. On the back, someone had written a phone number in pencil. He couldn't remember who. Maya coughed. The sound came from a long way off. Franz stood up. He went to the window and looked at the dead birch tree. A magpie perched on one of the bare branches, then flew away. He watched the empty space where it had been. The radiator clicked again. The apartment was warm enough now. He found his father's wallet on the counter where the kettle sat. Inside were 12 euros, a social security card, and a photograph of Sabine that had been cut from a larger picture. In it, she was younger, smiling at someone outside the frame. He placed the euros in his pocket and the card in the drawer with the unused smartphone. The landlady came at noon. She had a master key and a notice about the rent, which was 2 weeks overdue. She saw Maya on the sofa, saw Franz standing in the kitchen doorway, and stopped. She had 3 sons of her own, all grown, all living in cities she had never visited. "I'll call someone," she said. She used her phone, speaking in a low voice. She did not look at the closed bedroom door. The men arrived in a van with no windows. They wore gray uniforms and moved with professional efficiency. They asked no questions. The landlady signed a form. Franz watched them carry the mattress-wrapped shape down the narrow stairs. The corners of the mattress scraped the walls, leaving marks that would need to be painted over. Maya had not spoken since morning. When the van left, she looked at Franz. He could see the question forming, then dissolving before it reached her lips. "They'll send papers," the landlady said. She meant about the burial. The council had a process for these situations. Franz nodded. He understood processes. He understood that there were forms for everything, even for this. That evening, he made the decision he had been avoiding. From Sabine's drawer, he took the smartphone and the SIM card she had left behind. He walked 3 blocks to the internet cafe, where students from the technical college sat in booths playing games. He paid 50 cents for 10 minutes. He inserted the SIM card. The phone required a PIN he didn't know. He typed 0000. It worked. There were 3 messages, all from the same number. The last one, sent Tuesday at 3:47 a.m., read, "The apartment is smaller than he said. The job didn't materialize. There's no heating." Franz deleted them. He removed the SIM card and placed it in his pocket. On the way home, he dropped it through a grate into the storm drain. He heard it hit the water below, a sound so small it might not have happened at all. Maya was sleeping when he returned. He sat beside her and felt her forehead. It was cooler. The fever had broken, or perhaps it had simply exhausted itself. He covered her with the blanket that smelled of faded roses. In the morning, a letter came from the health center. They had missed the appointment. A new one would need to be scheduled. The letter included a form for exemption from fees, which required proof of income. Franz placed it in the drawer with the Social Security card. The landlady knocked again. She brought a bag of groceries, bread, milk, tins of soup, with labels in languages neither Franz nor Maya could read. She did not come inside. She left the bag at the door. "Your mother," she said. "If she calls, tell her about the rent." "She won't call," Franz said. The landlady looked at him, then at Maya on the sofa. She nodded. It was not agreement, merely acknowledgement of a fact. That required no further discussion. That night, Franz lay on the floor beside the sofa. Maya's breathing had returned to something like normal. He thought about the storm drain and the SIM card. He thought about the mattress and the marks on the wall. He thought about the appointment on Friday that had not been kept, and the new appointment that would require proof they could not provide. He understood, without needing to put it into words, that this was not a temporary condition. The apartment had become a place where things ended, not where they began. The choices had been made by Sabine, by Stefan, by the man in the city who had promised heating. Each choice had led here, to this room, to this silence, to the weight of an unused smartphone in a drawer. Maya shifted in her sleep. She murmured something that might have been a name, or might have been nothing. Franz did not ask. He simply pulled the blanket higher over her shoulders and waited for morning, which would come without any need for him to call it. The room was on the 3rd floor of a building, where the stairwell smelled of frying oil and something sweet that had burned. Sabine sat on the mattress that took up most of the floor. The window looked onto a courtyard, where rainwater collected in an oil drum, and beyond that, the concrete back of a parking garage. She had been here for 3 weeks, though she had stopped counting after the first 10 days. Klaus had taken her phone on the 2nd night. "You won't need it," he said. "You're starting fresh." He had a key for the deadbolt, which he used when he left for his truck driving shifts. The knob turned from inside, but the door wouldn't open. The first time she had tried it, she spent an hour listening to the metal give slightly, then hold. She stopped trying after that. He brought food, in plastic containers, schnitzel that had gone soft, potatoes in sauce that formed a skin. He placed them on the floor. He never stayed. He had a wife, he explained once, and a daughter who was Maya's age. The information landed between them like a dropped plate. On the 4th week, he brought another man. The man smelled of cigarettes and leather. He sat on the only chair, while Klaus stood by the door. The man talked about his construction business, about cash payments, about arrangements. Sabine understood without being told. She had worked the supermarket checkout for 6 months. She knew what people bought when they thought no one was watching. She stopped asking Klaus about the papers he had promised. She stopped mentioning the small apartment he had described, the one near the park where she could get a job cleaning offices. She learned to identify the sound of his boots on the stairs, the particular rhythm that meant he was alone, the hesitation that meant he wasn't. In the evenings, she stood at the window and watched the parking garage lights come on. She thought about the apartment at the edge of town. She thought about the chip in the glass, the wobbling table, the dead birch tree. She thought about Maya's blanket with the faded roses. These thoughts arrived without sentimentality, merely as facts. The kettle clicked off. The radiator hummed. The blanket had roses. One night, she took the fork Klaus had forgotten and tried to work the screws from the window frame. The metal was soft, and the tines bent. She wrapped the fork in a cloth and placed it back in the drawer. Klaus didn't notice. He rarely looked at the drawer. By the 6th week, she had a system. She saved bread crusts under the mattress. She filled the water glass and placed it on the windowsill, where it caught the morning sun. She made marks on the wall with a piece of plaster that had fallen from the ceiling. The marks meant nothing. They were simply proof that time was passing, that she was still here, that the room had not swallowed her. Klaus stopped bringing food. He left money instead, crumpled bills on the floor. As if she were a delivery, he had accepted and now refused. She used the money to buy bread from the Turkish shop on the corner. When he let her out on Wednesdays, she always bought the same thing: 2 rolls, 1 tin of beans. The shopkeeper looked at her without speaking. He had seen this calculation before. On the 7th Wednesday, she did not return. She walked 3 blocks then until she found the train station. She bought a ticket to the city where she had once lived. The ticket cost more than she had. She paid anyway. The machine accepted her bills and gave her coins she could not use. She sat on a bench near the taxi stand. It was August, and the asphalt smelled of melting. She had not eaten in 2 days. She watched people move past with purpose, with phones, with children who asked questions. A woman dropped a coin. It rolled to Sabine's foot. She left it there. Someone else picked it up. When Franz saw her, he was carrying a bag of bread from the discount bakery. He had started working for a man who collected scrap metal. The work was irregular, but it paid in cash. He was 17 now. His shoulders had settled into a permanent stoop. He didn't recognize her at first. She was smaller than he remembered, as if she had collapsed into herself. He would have walked past, but she said his name, came out as a question barely audible. He stopped. The bag in his hand felt heavy. He looked at the woman on the bench. He knew her then. Not suddenly, not completely, in fragments. The line of her mouth, the way her shoulders curved inward, as if she were carrying something she could not put down. He sat beside her. For a moment nothing passed between them. No tears. No words. "You're grown," she said at last. Not surprised. Just stating a fact. He nodded. She reached toward him. Stopped. Her fingers brushed his sleeve and stayed there, uncertain. "And your father?" she asked. "Papa is dead," he said. It was the first thing that came to him, a fact that needed stating. She nodded. He thought she might ask how, or when, but she only looked at his hands. They were scarred from the metal work. "Maya is married," he said. "She lives in the north, with her husband's family." Sabine closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were dry. "I have a fever," she said. "I need a doctor." Franz took her to the municipal clinic. The wait was 4 hours. The doctor was a young man with tired eyes. He took her temperature, listened to her chest, asked for her insurance card. She gave him Klaus's expired one. The doctor looked at it, then at her. He did not ask questions. He wrote a prescription for antibiotics and a referral for blood work. At the pharmacy, they said the prescription would cost 23 euros. Franz had 18. They left with nothing. He took her to the train station cafeteria and bought her coffee. She held the cup with both hands, as if for warmth, though the day was hot. The coffee left a ring on the table. Neither of them wiped it away. "Will you come home?" he asked. He meant the apartment with the dead birch tree, the wobbling table, the drawer with the unused smartphone. She shook her head. "I can't." He understood. He had not asked about Klaus. He had not asked where she had been. The facts were apparent, in her shoes, in her silence, in the way she did not look at him. When she said his name, "I'll send money," he said. "For the medicine." She nodded. The coffee grew cold. The station announcement played twice. When he looked up from his cup, she was gone. The plastic bag remained on the floor. It contained the bread rolls and the tin of beans from the Turkish shop. The hospital called 3 days later. They had found his number in her pocket, written on a receipt from the scrap metal yard. She had been admitted through emergency. She had not given her name. She had not responded to treatment. She had died at 4:15 a.m., when the city was silent, between the last night bus and the first tram. The social worker at the hospital explained the process. There was a form for unclaimed bodies. The city would handle it. Franz signed where she indicated. The signature was not his father's, but it was close enough. Maya arrived the next day. She was pregnant, her belly showing beneath her coat. She stood in the hospital corridor and looked at the wall. She did not ask questions. She had stopped asking them years ago. They buried Sabine in the municipal cemetery, in a section where the graves were marked with numbers, not names. The priest read from a card. The ground was hard from the summer drought. Took the diggers longer than usual. Afterward, Franz and Maya walked to the tram stop. They did not speak. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of people who have learned that some things cannot be said, only carried. Maya's husband came to collect her. He was a quiet man who worked in a warehouse. He shook Franz's hand. The handshake was proper firm. He helped Maya into the car. She looked back once, but Franz was already walking away, toward the housing block, where the birch tree remained dead, where the table still wobbled, where the drawer held the unused smartphone and the appointment card that had never been used. The rent was 3 months overdue now. He would have to talk to the landlady. He would have to find more scrap metal work. He would have to buy potatoes, the kind that didn't sprout so quickly. At the intersection, he waited for the light. A woman crossed in front of him, talking on her phone. She laughed at something the person on the other end said. The sound was bright and foreign, like a coin dropped in a country where it had no value.